Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thanks again for stopping by. I do appreciate it. Just to remind you that this weekend I'm in London, and if you're around, it would be great to see you. I'm at a function at the Olympia. This is the Homecoming Revolution, which is reaching out to the diaspora, the African diaspora, and I'm just putting together my presentation, which plays on the idea of, when you look outside the window, what do you see? Potholes or opportunities? I'm very much looking forward to being in London, actually. I of course, lived in London from the age of 13 when I went to school at Westminster until I was 40, except for 3 years at Durham University. I've walked all over that city, been everywhere, and I remember walking late one night from Hampstead Heath all the way to Putney. And it really remains one of the most globally fluent cities in the world. You will recall when I visited in August last year, I like to think I called the recovery. I wrote then on the 12th of August, the recovery in the West is not a mirage, it is real. And I said, how does an investor play this recovery? I think you need to be net long sterling. It was at 153 around then. It's now near 167. And I said then, I reckon there is an outside chance that UK property, which is projected to rally 25% over 5 years, achieves that in 24 to 30 months. I like looking for narratives that are embedded and entrenched, and where I can see an inflection point. And I wrote in August that the United Kingdom, Europe, and the US have inflected. Watch closely how the narrative starts changing. And then on the note of Putney, where I lived all those years, I cannot recall the number of times I caught the number 14 bus back to Putney Heath, and I'll put up a photograph of Putney Heath and the bus stop and my local pub. I don't know if you can see it in that photograph, was the Green Man. Sun Tzu, every battle is won before it's ever fought. Be extremely subtle, even to the point of formlessness. Be extremely mysterious, even to the point of soundlessness. Thereby you can be the director of the opponent's fate. Then it is dark. It is a night where kings in golden suits ride elephants over the mountains. John Cheever. Political reflections, I turn to a story in the Independent where it's saying fracking is turning the US into a bigger oil producer than Saudi Arabia. Even predicting future oil output isn't the precise science you'd expect. We keep raising our forecasts and we keep underestimating production. Last year, US production reached 7.4 million barrels a day, an increase of 15.3% on the preceding year of 2012. A jump that large hasn't been seen since 1951. This year, the US should produce 8.3 million barrels a day. Take another indicator, the volumes of crude being moved by trains, often a mile long, from the shale fields to refineries and terminals. In all of 2008, companies moved 9,500 wagons of the black stuff. Last year, 400,000 of them rumbled across America. How long America's shale boom will last is hard to forecast also. In this article in The Independent, they quote Robert D. Blackwell, who says the United States is now poised to become an energy superpower. Since 1971, when US oil production peaked, energy has been construed as a strategic liability for the country, with its ever-growing thirst for reasonably priced fossil fuels, sometimes necessitating incongruous alliances and complex obligations abroad. That logic has been upended, and the newly unlocked energy is set to boost the US economy and grant Washington newfound leverage around the world. And then going to that article which he's quoting in The Independent, which was in Foreign Affairs, America's Energy Edge, the Geopolitical Consequences of the Shale Revolution. Only 5 years ago, the world's supply of oil appeared to be peaking, and as conventional gas production declined in the United States, it seemed that the country would become dependent on costly natural gas imports. But in the years since, those predictions have proved spectacularly wrong. Global energy production has begun to shift away from traditional suppliers in Eurasia and the Middle East as producers tap unconventional gas and oil resources around the world. The greatest revolution, however, has taken place in the United States, where producers have taken advantage of two newly viable technologies to unlock resources once deemed commercially infeasible: horizontal drilling, which allows wells to penetrate bands of shale deep underground, and hydraulic fracturing or fracking, which uses the injection of high-pressure fluid to release gas and oil from rock formations, saying that the resulting uptick in energy production has been dramatic. Between 2007 and 2012, US shale gas production rose by over 50% each year, and its share of total US gas production jumped from 5% to 39%. Terminals once intended to bring liquefied natural gas to US consumers are being reconfigured to export US LNG abroad. Between 2007 and 2012, fracking generated an 18-fold increase in US production of what is known as light tight oil, high-quality petroleum found in shale or sandstone that can be released by fracking. The American energy revolution, and this is the area that I like, the intersection point between commerce, finance, and geopolitics, does not just have commercial implications, it also has wide-reaching geopolitical consequences. Global energy trade maps are already being redrawn as US imports continue to decline and exporters find new markets. Most West African oil, for example, now flows to Asia rather than the United States. As US production continues to increase, it will put downward pressure on global oil and gas prices, thereby diminishing the geopolitical leverage that some energy suppliers have wielded for decades. The biggest benefits, according to this article, will accrue to the United States. Ever since 1971, when US oil production peaked, energy has been construed as a strategic liability for the country. That logic has been upended, and the newly unlocked energy is set to boost the US economy. And saying that, the most dramatic possible geopolitical consequence of the North American energy boom is that the increase in US and Canadian oil production could disrupt the global price of oil. According to them, it could fall by 20% or more. And that's an interesting point. That will be severely disruptive for the oil producers if we see a very sharp price move. And then saying that in addition to North American oil, as it floods the market, OPEC's ability to control prices will be challenged, which is an important point as well. And my conclusions were that energy is China's Achilles heel, in particular in the context of the pivot to Asia. America has a unique ability to conduct distant blockade operations and switch the light off. And I wrote about this severally, but last time I wrote about it was on the 19th of August 2013, when I said China's dependence on imported crude oil is increasing, and the US's, interestingly, is decreasing. I was referring to the Indian Ocean in this context, saying Professor Felipe Fernandez Amesto explains why the precocity of the Indian Ocean as a zone of long-range navigation and cultural exchange is one of the glaring facts of history made possible by the reversible escalator of the monsoon. I have no doubt that the Indian Ocean is set to regain its glory days. China's dependence on imported crude oil is increasing, and the US's, interestingly, is decreasing. I'm also certain the eastern seaboard of Africa from Mozambique through Somalia is the last great energy prize in the 21st century. Therefore, the control of the Indian Ocean becomes kind of decisive, and with control, China can be shut down quite quickly. Therefore, a sine qua non of President Obama's pivot to Asia, in my view, is US-NATO power projection over the Indian Ocean. On that note, I'll do a little photo tour of the eastern board of Eastern Africa, the eastern seaboard of Africa, Maputo from the sea. This is a photograph I took at sunset. I quite like it. The seaside at Diani 27 days ago, when the sea was so still it looked like glass. And the seafront at Lamu, more than 1,265 days ago. The US has hit out at a provocative move, calls China move provocative on Philippine ships. The United States on Wednesday accused China of raising tensions by blocking 2 Philippine vessels as it urged freedom of navigation in the tense South China Sea. The United States, a treaty-bound ally of Manila, said it was troubled by Sunday's incident in which China prevented movement of 2 ships contracted by the Philippine Navy to deliver supplies and troops to the disputed Second Thomas Shoal. This is a provocative move that raises tensions pending resolution of competing claims in the South China Sea. There should be no interference with the efforts of claimants to maintain the status quo. Philippines on Tuesday summoned China's chargé d'affaires, accusing Beijing of a clear and urgent threat to Manila's interests. Beijing countered that the ships infringed China's territorial sovereignty and violated a 2002 declaration of conduct in the South China Sea. The United States rejected China's stance, saying that countries have the right to regular resupply and rotation of personnel, 2 locations before the 2002 declaration. This is all about the pivot, right? I mean, the Philippines actually is probably more in Shinzo Abe's camp, increasingly trying to use the U.S. In order to stake out a more forward position. U.S. investigators suspect that the Malaysia Airlines flight 370 stayed in the air for about 4 hours past the time it reached its last confirmed location, raising the possibility that the plane could have flown on for hundreds of additional miles under conditions that remain murky. Aviation investigators and national security officials believe the plane flew for a total of 5 hours, based on data automatically downloaded and sent to the ground from Boeing, as part of a routine maintenance and monitoring program. U.S. counterterrorism officials are pursuing the possibility that a pilot or someone else on board the plane may have diverted it toward an undisclosed location after intentionally turning off the jetliner's transponders to avoid radar detection, according to one person tracking the probe. The huge uncertainty about where the plane was headed and why it apparently continued flying so long without working transponders has raised theories among investigators that the aircraft may have been commandeered for a reason that appears unclear to U.S. authorities. A total flight time of 5 hours after departing Kuala Lumpur means that Boeing 777 could have continued for an additional distance of about 2,200 nautical miles, reaching points as far as the Indian Ocean, the border of Pakistan, or even the Arabian Sea, based on the jet's cruising speed. I refer you to yesterday's link where Boeing had warned of computer takeover of 777. The integrated network configurations in the Boeing Model 777, 200, 300, and 300ER series may enable increased connectivity with external network sources. And I think that's really the key. And then saying the existing regulations guidance material did not anticipate these types of system architectures. Furthermore, 14 CFR regulations and current system safety assessment policy and techniques do not address potential security vulnerabilities which could be exploited by unauthorized access to airplane networks and servers. Therefore, these special conditions are being issued to ensure that the security is not compromised by unauthorized wired or wireless electronic connections between the airplane information systems domain, aircraft control domain, and the passenger entertainment services. On that note, I'll put up a photograph of the Malaysian Transport Minister Hishamuddin Hussein in Kuala Lumpur as he briefs the media. And then jumping to Crimea, just a short note, within a week of its building being taken over by armed gunmen last month, the regional parliament in Crimea was voting in favor of the Ukrainian region becoming part of Russia. How that was achieved under the leadership of Sergei Aksyonov, 41, is a Russian separatist whose political party won 4% of the vote at the parliamentary election in 2010, was a masterclass. Reuters says Moscow denies any role in installing Aksyonov, who is known from his business days by the nickname the Goblin. But even those close to the Kremlin say Russia picked him. My conclusions are, I just don't see how Vladimir Putin retreats. He cannot lose Crimea. It would be a geopolitical red line because of the loss of Sevastopol. To lose Sevastopol would be the equivalent of castrating Putin in Russia. It's simply unconscionable from his point of view. I think the Europeans see that a bit more clearly than the US. I'll put up a photograph of Sevastopol and then finally just sign off by referring you to an article in Global Research which says Russia really wants to go east. It has no designs on former East Bloc states, which are all now NATO members, but the West wants to bait the country into a confrontation on its western flank. And it's all about containment, really, and encirclement. I've spoken about that in respect to China. And that's why I keep putting up that image that Ai Weiwei installed in the Hirschhorn of the snake, because it represents for me this whole concept of encirclement. Currency markets, the euro has topped 139.34 last, and this is an October 2011 high. Dollar index 79.45. Japanese yen 102.76, it's a buy above 103 in my opinion. Swiss franc 0.8730, the pound 166.60. Aussie very strong 0.9070. The Statistics Bureau said employers added 47,300 positions last month, surpassing the 15,000 gain forecast in a Bloomberg survey. India rupee 60.905, the South Korean won 1066.45, the Rial 235.51, Egyptian pound 695.96, and the Rand 1076.43. The dollar has been soft, trade soft. It's down 1.1% this year. The yen has risen 1.8%. The euro is up 0.5%. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index. Trades real soft, or in traders' parlance, trades like a pony. A pony doesn't run very fast, unlike Zarkava, which won the Arc de Triomphe. Euro dollar 139.34. My stop remains at 133.84. Draghi's commentary continues to build confidence in the euro. You remember his comments about it being a zone of stability. And finally, dollar yen 102.76. You know what I think. I think it's a trading buy, frankly, but I'd prefer to have it with a 103 handle. A dizzying fall in copper to a near 4-year low. Global stocks fell a 4th day in copper. This is yesterday, often regarded as a proxy for China's economic fortunes, hit its lowest level since 2010, after Shanghai futures had again fallen by their 5% daily limit. At least one US scrap copper trader has suffered large losses after a buyer in China defaulted on a deal in the past week, one of the first signs that sinking prices and tightening credit are affecting the physical market. I'll put up a 3-month chart of copper and just say this signals big problems for Zambia. Gold jumped 1.3% yesterday after Ukraine's Prime Minister warned that Russia is massing troops near its border. Last trading at 1373, rose as high as 1375, which was the highest level since September 19th, climbed for a 3rd day, poised for a 6th weekly gain. Up 14% so far this year. I think it's very toppy. Crude oil, $98.30. I was calling it below 100 when we were above there. The US Department of Energy is saying they plan to shortly release up to 5 million barrels of crude oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, a government source said. I think I'm going back to swinging a meaningful line at the NYMEX, actually. Coming to Africa, African Union peacekeepers in the Somali army have begun a major offensive against the Al-Shabaab militants. The UN Special Representative to Somalia said on Wednesday, urging donors to fund logistical support. Special Representative Nick Kay said the push started this month when Ethiopian troops took control of towns in southern Somalia, including Bakul regional capital Hudur. The offensive is progressing quite well, he said on the telephone from Mogadishu. The Ethiopians clearly have been doing well, recaptured several important towns in Bakul and in Gedo. Kay said Al-Shabaab had to be pushed out of territory where it was training more insurgents, taxing businesses and importing arms through ports. That's why this AMISOM and Somali National Army offensive is really important, to deprive them of those bases. In a rare move, the UN has passed a resolution to provide logistical support to the SNA troops fighting alongside the 22,000-strong AMISOM force, which has been in Somalia since 2007. UN Support Office for AMISOM needed more funding to do its job, and so far only Britain and the US have pledged a total of about $6.5 million. He said the rule of thumb was that to begin with at least $20 million would be a good amount to keep going. South African oil share came down yesterday. It's up 2.53% so far in 2014. South Africa's Jacob Zuma is said to choose Ramaphosa as deputy president and will be tasked with managing Africa's biggest economy and putting a 20-year government plan into action following May 7 elections, according to two people familiar with the plans of South Africa's ruling party. The ANC is set to win the national elections, having secured more than 60% of every vote since the end of apartheid in 1994. Ipsos said ANC support has dropped to 53% in a survey published January 11th, but that's 3 times the support of the next most popular party. They're definitely not going to make it a 60 plus. But look, I think Ramaphosa's inclusion will be seen as positive for business. Dollar Rand 1076.50. Put up a 3-month chart, a little bit no man's land around here. Egyptian pound 695.78. The Egyptian stock market, the best performing stock market in Africa this year, up 19.44% year to date. Nigeria all share down 4.96%. Ghana Stock Exchange up 12.4%, but it's been a torrid year for the cedi as it was last year, and quite a bit of the returns have been eroded by a weak currency. How Africa Tweets is an interesting report put out by Portland Communications, and I'll put up a diagram of where the most tweets come from over a 24-hour period in Africa. Here in Kenya, CIC Insurance reported full-year profit after tax expanded 1.4285%. Gross premiums up 22.768%. Profit before tax was up marginally. Profit after tax up 1.4285%, EPS up 4.6875%, final dividend of 10 cents a share, proposing an increase in company share capital from 3 to 6 billion, and a bonus for 1 for every 5 held. In their company commentary, they are talking about the fact that claims incurred grew by 30% to 6 billion. This was mainly due to bad claims experience in medical, motor, private, and employee group life products. At their investor briefing, they said that wrote over 600 million of premiums in 2013 in microinsurance, targeting $1 billion in 2014. Key areas will be microhealth, life, and micro pensions. Got some land in Isinya and Kiambu. They're looking to develop that. Expanding regionally, already operational in South Sudan, looking at Uganda and Malawi. And I think they've spent a few basis points chasing growth. There is some headroom from these levels of 660. Investors at the NSE tend to prefer lower denominated shares. They're clearly expanding their geographical footprint. The Kenya shilling was last at 86.50, where it's been for quite a while. Then Nairobi all shares up 4.29% in 2014, and within striking distance, and 1.56% of an all-time closing high from the 24th of January this year. The NSE 20 back into positive territory, plus 0.2%. Yesterday, we had some good action at the stock market. CIC Insurance rallied 5.303% on the back of those results and the bonus. Standard Bank closed at an all-time high. That's up 31.03% in 2014. Safaricom testing 12 yesterday and probably crossed it today. Just to give you some other background, Safaricom is plus 9.677% in 2014, and it's going to test its all-time high of 12.45 from the 24th of June. Nation Media very active yesterday, eased 1.602%, must have had a concession built into the trade because it traded 761,000 shares, 0.403% of its issued shares. They had a cash pile of 4.206 billion at the end of the first half results. As I said, CIC surged CFC rallied 4.587% to close at an all-time high. And Portland, East African Portland, is up 28.26% in 2014, as people tend to warm to the new appointments and the expansion in Tanzania. Once again, thank you for stopping by.